Finally, tonight, I want to talk about a major community engagement process that begins tonight with your consideration and vote on the next steps in our facilities master planning process. I'm going to ask Alex Trevino, our Director of Capital Improvements, and the head of the firm of DeYoung and Richter, Tracy Richter, to provide some insight into their master planning services for this historic project. As they come to the podium, though, let me share just a little perspective. Columbus is a growing and thriving metropolitan city. Our district and community are committed to a long-term vision of providing great schools and great opportunities for every child in every neighborhood of our city, from cradle to career. We want to ensure that as a district, we are effectively planning for that growth and change so we can meet the demands and population shifts of the future. Through this board's leadership, we have created a volunteer ad hoc committee of the Neighborhood School Development Partnership, and this special committee will be chaired by board members W. Shauna Gibbs and Dominic Peretti. This process will be a first of its kind for the district, pulling together and analyzing data, research, studies, and detailed budget and historical information that will help an informed decision-making process. And through the help of our consultant, DeYoung Richter, we will make this process inclusive of a variety of stakeholders across our district and community, because we know how diverse our community is. And it will be a transparent and collaborative process in order that our community will know what was occurring and when it will occur at each step of the way. After the brief presentation by Mr. Trevino and Mr. Richter, we will gladly entertain any questions that the board may have with Chief Operating Officer Maurice Oldham. At this point, let me ask Mr. Trevino to share some more and to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford. President Baker, Vice President Stewart, members of the board, Treasurer Bohoric, Internal Auditor Smith, Director Johnson, Deputy Superintendent Dr. Stanford. This evening, I'm pleased to present to you our outline for a bold new step in the Facilities Master Plan originally initiated by the district in 2002, when the board adopted the district's first comprehensive Facilities Master Plan. Authored in conjunction with the Ohio School Facilities Commission, that plan envisioned 128 new or renovated school projects to be constructed over a 15-year period that would house approximately 60,000 students. Now, 13 years into this initial plan, we have secured funding for 46 school projects to house over 23,000 students. 43 of those projects are complete, with the final 3 in construction and scheduled for completion over the 2016-2017 school year. While we are thankful for the voters' support and proud of this accomplishment, our work is far from complete. District demographics have shifted significantly from 2002, with decreases in our total enrollment and shifts in population density across our various neighborhoods. We've seen increases in our poverty rate, and we've seen increases in the need for special programming. It is time to reassess, reevaluate, reimagine what a comprehensive facility master plan for Columbus City Schools could look like. When I say comprehensive, we intend to evaluate all of our district's unique attributes, including grade banding, feeder patterns, attendance boundaries, school choice, our real estate holdings, administrative and support facilities, early childhood education, and adult education. We'll focus on providing a continuum of services that equitably support, from cradle to career, our general education, special education, and our accelerated students, providing accommodations for students with disabilities, our English language learners, and each student we serve. I want to reinforce our intention to honor the board's goals, particularly goals 2 and 3. While our pursuit will be to create learning environments that are student-centered, efficient, and stable, to reach that end, we will ensure that the district is accountable to the community's confidence in the district is restored. This facilities planning process will be collaborative, iterative, and transparent. At the board's direction, the formation of an ad hoc committee to oversee this process is proceeding. The ad hoc committee will make recommendations to the Neighborhood School Development Partnership, which will in turn make recommendations to this board. Selection of the ad hoc committee members is underway, with a focus on equitable representation geographically and from our various stakeholder groups. Finally, as we lay the groundwork internally to continue the work of our facilities master plan, we recognize that while our district staff has superior institutional knowledge of our own operations, we lacked both the manpower to complete this planning effort in a reasonable amount of time and the national expertise to look at our operations through an unbiased lens. Determining that the best course of action would be to bring a facilities master planning consultant on board, the district issued a request for qualifications, seeking vendors who could provide those services. 4 firms responded and were ranked. Based upon those rankings, the 2 highest rated firms were invited to present technical proposals of how they would accomplish this work, and the 2 highest ranked firms were subsequently interviewed. Based upon the interview, the firm recommended for the facility master planning contract is the firm of DeYoung Richter. This evening, I have Tracy Richter, CEO of DeYoung Richter, with me. He will now provide a high-level overview of the process envisioned for this facilities master planning process.
Thank you, Alex. President Baker, Vice President Stewart, members of the board and district staff, and certainly members of the community. It's our pleasure to come here to present to you an overview of the process and to hopefully answer some questions you may have, some clarifying questions as we begin this process. I will start by kind of introducing who we are. We are a Franklin County firm, but we are a national firm. Our firm has worked in 48 states. I personally am a lifelong educator. I taught middle grades education before I found planning. Since I was 19, I started substitute teaching, and so it has been my passion for education from the beginning. I personally have worked in 23 states in the 15 years that I've done this. I've worked in districts from 1,000 to 300,000, and bring a perspective that hopefully is an objective perspective, but understanding that this planning is happening just across the street from where I live. And so our goal is to show you that there are plenty of ways that you can address facilities needs. And I think that a facilities master plan is a bit of a misnomer, because I believe that everything that was talked about, the education of students, transportation, food service, technology, all of those get included in the facility planning, because all of those make up what the facility does, and that supports our children. And so that is our goal. And so you know that. My personal goal is to service as many children as we can with the best facilities across this country, because they deserve it. And I wake up every day to do just that. We are pleased to bring in Future Think with us, who is Tracy Healy, who is an LEDE certified firm. But we don't bring her in just as a partner. Tracy Healy was an original member of the DeYoung and Associates group, who we are the next generation of. And Tracy and I have worked together for 15 years as partners. We continue to work on projects across the country and even locally together. Her focus is enrollment, and her specialty is enrollment, although we have expertise in enrollment and geographic information systems analysis. And Tracy's expertise and her deep knowledge of your enrollment and your data will be a benefit to us to get a good jump start onto your process. So we already come in educated to your process of student data. And so we're excited that Tracy is going to be part of our team on this. Tonight's presentation, I'm going to take you through kind of a high level, but I'm going to divide it into scope of service, not necessarily sequence, but I will interject sequence as I go through that. And so I will try to make it clear that this is the order that we intend to go, but trying to group it together so we can see like services. Our first thing that we do in the process like this is we do a plan for planning. We believe that this could be our most critical meeting in the whole process. Our plan for plan meeting intends to invite committee chairs and district staff to start to walk through process, timeline, deliverables, all the things that are intended to make a clear pathway for what we want to accomplish. In this meeting, we intend to understand the district's expectation of your consultant. Also, though, we expect that the opposite is that there's some level of expectation that we have from the district as far as clarifying where we get data, leadership, communication, all of those things. One of the most important things is to determine what the project timeline will be, when things will happen. Something as simple as looking at spring break to make sure we don't schedule meetings during times when people aren't in school. But other things about how long you want to do, what our expectations are for when things need to get done, nights of meetings, all of those things that are important to make sure that this is a successful process. Those roles and responsibilities will be clearly defined in that meeting. One of the other pieces of collection that we do is enrollment projections, and understanding that projections aren't just about where students go and where they're going to be. There is a lot of information that could be gleaned out of how enrollment projections are done, migrations of students, why they're there, why programs are in different places. This is an important piece to what we do. We need to know how and where we're going to serve students and how many we're going to serve. And so we need to make sure we have a clear understanding of this. Capacity review and analysis. I can tell you that in the last 5 years, capacity may be one of the most talked about topics in education. Understanding that a building has a fluid capacity is not something to grasp on very easily. Programs influence how many students a school can hold. Demographic shifts, the students you serve, will move the capacity of a building around a little bit. One of the things that we have to do is come to clear definition on what capacity means to Columbus City schools. And it means something different everywhere. And understanding that to make sure that it fits the needs of your students, of your communities, is most important. We just don't take a template capacity model and say, this fits everybody, because that's not possible. And so we're going to spend extensive time reviewing this. We have built into this contract and scope of service as deep a dive as you want to go. Or we don't have to go so far if we don't need to, where we've come to consensus on this. So we think it's an important piece to the data that we're going to collect. The background report is a compilation of all of the things that we're going to talk about to the stakeholders. The background report is a critical first report that comes out that is obviously reviewed by the ad hoc committee, by district staff, by the board before it does go out. But it is a document that's a consumable document of data. It is difficult to walk out to communities with a book 500 pages deep of enrollment data, capacity data, program information, and all that. So we need to make sure, and we will in our planning meeting, what we need to share and how we need to share. It's not what we need to share, but all the information that is important to the decision making and why we use that data for decision making. This is a fluid document in itself, because as we go out and we talk to communities and we talk more in the ad hoc committee, we may say we have to add something in that background report to make it clear to the community why we're using that data or what that piece of data is. When we go out to those community meetings, they're going to ask us, hey, is it possible to get that kind of data? And if it is, we get it. If it's not, we let them know why we can't get it. But that has to be included in this background report to make sure everybody has a clear understanding of the data. And if we all start from the same kind of baseline of data, I think we can move forward in a better direction. Our community engagement process is an ongoing process as we go through. You've heard several comments regarding the ad hoc committee. We believe that this is a best practice in any facility planning process that we do. We use the term steering committee a lot of times around the country, but the ad hoc committee serves the same purpose because we believe it's a best practice to use a community group to help us go through a process like this. You know, we do bring a national expertise, but what we don't bring is kind of the local knowledge that everybody that lives in these neighborhoods can give us. And we think that's critical to us, that there is no way to know every small construction project or large construction project or what's going on in every neighborhood without a committee like this. And so they bring that knowledge to us, that local knowledge to us. We vet all of our data through this committee to make sure that it's as accurate as it can be before it goes out, and making sure that when we go to meetings that we're prepared with the help of that ad hoc committee. I believe one of the most important roles of the ad hoc committee is community outreach. When we go out to community meetings, and we're going to go across the city and have large community meetings, it is important for this group to go out and to communicate that we're going to have these meetings. We talk a lot about how you get people to community meetings, and I will tell you that you can send as many flyers, you can tweet as many tweets, you can put as many Facebook postings as you want, but word of mouth and a personal invitation will get more people to a meeting than any source of information that you can give. And so we want to make sure that the ad hoc committee has a good relationship within, whether it's the business community, the school community, their personal school, that we communicate that out there. Eventually, this group is going to help shape some options that we develop. They will help shape recommendations that will work closely then in with the neighborhood school development partnerships that are out there and that committee that we have, and report to them when we get to preferred options and recommendations. And so this is a critical kind of group for us. Now, we'll meet throughout the process. This is one of those instances where it's not just ad hoc meetings and then we go out. What we'll do is we'll do a couple of or few ad hoc meetings to get ingrained in the data, and then we're going to go out to the community, and we're going to go to several sites in the community or in the city to make sure that we reach every neighborhood that we can. Our first community meeting is about establishing the rules, what I call the rules for planning. We call it our educational framework meeting. Here we're going to go talk to community stakeholders about what they see as expectations for their schools. Now, one of the things that we do in the Plan for Plan meeting and then in our early ad hoc meetings is to determine what those topics could be. They range anywhere from school size to grade configuration to early education to tolerance levels for renovation versus replacement. There's a lot of different topics that we could address. And again, what makes districts unique across the country is what topics that you want to address that allow us to do the planning work based on what the community's expectations of our plans are. And so we want to make sure that we go out to the community and we ask those questions and give us those rules. Because when we walk back out with preferred options and recommendations, and we're within the rules that that communities see and expect of us, then we see that we can get better buy-in of those decisions because we're following rules established by our communities. We take all of those results back to the ad hoc committee, obviously, and then we're going to do some options work sessions that I'll talk about in a minute. Our second community meeting, we are going to take those options that we develop, and once again, I have to kind of jump a little bit, and I apologize for that. And we take options back to the community because if you learn nothing else in this work that we do, is that there's more than one way to solve a lot of things out there. Whether they're additions to schools or replacements or boundary adjustments or program articulation or whatever the right solution is, we have to present what those options are to communities and see, once again, where's your tolerance for that? What do you believe is best service to your community and to your students and to your parents and your staff? And so we're going to go back and we're going to talk to the communities once again. At these community meetings, I want to make it clear that we're going to make sure that every language need is met through translators, through how we do our questionnaires. They will be in the language that is demanded of that community. So we're going to use the translators that the district uses of members of your community that go out and help us in these meetings. We offer every community meeting we do, we offer online presence so people can respond. If they can't make it to meetings, they can respond online if they need to. We also provide it to schools to make sure that parents who don't have access to technology can turn in a survey if they need to get their voice heard. And so there's a lot of different ways that we want to try to communicate and get response back. And I think that in this, and as in any case, anything short of knocking on doors will do. Knocking on every door is very difficult to do. We will communicate as best we can to make sure we get everybody there. And look, I know in every process that we do, there's going to be a specialty group that we have to go out and meet with because it's the best way to meet with that community. Look, if that comes up, that's what we got to do to get this done the right way. And so our community engagement process is intended to be transparent. And again, we don't use transparency as a buzzword. We don't hide anything because there's nothing to hide. It's public data. The enrollment's out there. Your finances are out there. The programs are out there. There is nothing that we have to hide in this. There are going to be options that are not viable options that you can do. And so we're going to vet through all those things. And so we believe that this is an important part of what we do in every process that we do. And it's a big part of what we do. I talked earlier about the options work session, the options and the recommendations. When we get done with the first community meeting, we go back to the ad hoc committee and we talk about the results of that. Again, establishing some of our rules around planning. But it's not just about rules. It's about board policy. It's about best practice within the district. It's about how we do things in Columbus City Schools. With the options work session, what we do is we take all the data that we've collected, enrollment, facilities, maintenance, all the GIS data, we take the community input, And we go into a room for 3 or 4 days and we work with ad hoc committee members, we work with the district staff and experts in the district, from transportation to academics to cafeteria staff, anybody that is part of making school decisions in that room. And we start to develop options. And we go through that, and it is a 3 or 4 day process of trying to get through some of the best solutions out there. This is a good time to mention where we update board members, because you are likely to get a lot of questions as we go through this. You're going to get some phone calls as decisions start to get made. We intend to update you as frequently as you need to be updated and want to be updated. That's our goal. An important part of our process is to making sure you're prepared with data and information to make decisions. And so after the options work sessions, we want to share those with you to make sure that when we go out to the communities, that these are the right options based on the constituencies that you know, that make sense, and that you're prepared, because when the options go out there, you're going to get phone calls, and we want to make sure that you're prepared with the right answers or with the right data to be prepared to answer questions there. We take that options work packet into the communities and we talk to them, and in the same process that I mentioned before, we take those options back, meet with ad hoc again, and then we start to develop what we call preferred options. We don't call them recommendations yet, because there's still more vetting to do as we get to what our preferred options are of the community, about what the data tells us about your budgets, about timelines, all of those. And again, trying to reporting to the NSDP through the ad hoc and to the board to make sure that we're getting to the right decision. And so the recommendations work session is set up just like the options work session. It just narrows it down to your preferred option. Eventually, what we're going to get to is a series of deliverables for you. The deliverables, obviously, in this are the summation and documentation of the entire process. Everything we do, we set up a website that is typically on our clients' websites that document everything we do: agendas, presentations, minutes from meetings. There is never a time that a community member should not know when we're meeting, because we are very transparent in that, and we want to make sure that if people want to see a meeting, it's there right in front of them. And again, we're very transparent in that. Our background reports and supporting data. Our background reports are obviously available for everybody to see. The supporting data oftentimes is those thick documents that is hard, 50,000 line items of things to read. Those are public information, and we'll have that supporting data to you. And of course, it's your data. When the process is done, this is how you want to house it, how you want to see it. Our community dialogue results are critical to the decision making. And so not only being transparent in those results, but being timely with those results to you so you can see what the community is feeling about some of the options that we have. And sometimes the community dialogue results are, we have to kind of determine what's a good timing for that. When you put it online for 7 days, well, some people, well, that's too short. And you put it for 10, and some people, well, that's too long. Or how do we get responses back from local schools that may not be able to get it to us electronically? And so we have to determine what those tolerances are for how, but we also need deadlines, and we need to make sure that we get response promptly to make good decisions. The recommendations report that will go to the NSDP will provide both short and long-term recommendations in their actions. I believe that every good facilities plan will have capital and non-capital items in them, because there are non-capital solutions to facilities plans, as we know. It will show project phasing if it's necessary. It will show timelines and prioritization is, again, locally defined. Sometimes a prioritization is a worst condition to best conditions. Sometimes it's a demographic need. Sometimes it's a programmatic need. And oftentimes it's a combination of all of them. And so once again, how we customize the Columbus City Plan is how that prioritization works that fits your community needs. And not only that, we have to service a pretty big geographic area and a pretty diverse population. And so we have to factor that in too, to make sure that the project phasing, the timeline, all those scenarios try to meet the need as best we can across and service all of our stakeholders out there. Obviously, we have projected costs in there. We believe that working with your FA or your underwriter at some point, or a combination of the two, will help us and advise us about where our costs are, how we can prioritize projects out there in time. So with that, that was about a 10-minute overview of a pretty complex process. I'm going to turn it back over to Alex, and he's right behind me, and then go to questions.
So in conclusion, in tonight's consent agenda, you'll find legislation recommending a contract to the firm of DeYoung Richter to provide community engagement services, and the services necessary to author a major revision to the district's facilities master planning process. And contingent upon your approval, we are prepared to move full speed into that planning process. And at this time, we'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trevino. Thank you very much, Mr. Richter. Are there questions from board members? Mr. Peretti?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, our community comment today, I think, is just a really, really good example of the importance of why we really need to get going on this right away. That and we've heard the capacity issues that we've had, and you know, what sort of timeline for a district with as many buildings as we have, what does that normally look like? Sort of getting through this process and going through all these various steps for a district with 111 buildings around? 10. I was close.
Good, I can take that. You know, a lot of times what gauges the timeline is the amount of community engagement that each district demands and community demands.
We do lots.
Yeah, lots. So I would say a typical, and we work with a lot of districts in this size, 25 to 75,000. The typical process, I'm going to tell you, is going to be 6 to 12 months. It could be, if we have less community engagement, and sometimes we do, where it's only one community meeting because that's what the community kind of expects, it'll be 6 months. With an ad hoc committee, NSDP, with committees that we need to meet with, we could be, again, it's in a 6 to 12 month. I can't give an exact date. I think better answered after our plan for planning when you come to join us to go through all of those things that we need to consider when we do this plan.
I'll yield this to my colleagues for further questions.
Mr. Cole?
Mr. Peretti actually asked my question.
Yes, thank you. Board Member Reyes?
Thank you. So kind of going around the same lines, so we are a large district, and we are a district that has a lot of constituency groups, and you kind of mentioned that there might be some need to go aside. How do you divide your community meetings? Do you look at past practices of other districts? Do you look at past practices that we've done? Because sometimes, you know, we've divided the city northwest, southeast. Sometimes we've divided the city based on maybe specialty. We have a lot of specialty schools. We've decided sometimes you can kind of see what areas of town. I mean, we have some areas that are very loud, some areas that are a little bit more passive. How, in your experience, have you dealt with maybe a district similar to ours that requires that kind of division?
Sure, I think there's a couple of approaches to this. I think you use both. I think that obviously we have done this in big districts across the country that we've seen some really good practices work. For instance, feeder patterns. You know, to group in feeder patterns where people understand the schools. When we go to their community meeting, they understand the schools we're talking about. So that is a really good practice to do, because then people aren't wandering off in their mind about, I don't know anything about that school. The other thing that you mentioned I think is critical is that there are areas, you're right, that are going to get big turnout that may demand that a couple of meetings to make sure that we get everybody into a room is important. But that doesn't mean we ignore and give less effort to those that don't get to those. And then what we do is that we try to look at strategies locally, and this is where your background comes into, the district, when I say your, comes into play to say, you know, this community doesn't go out unless you go to this function. And then you go to that function. I think every process does it. I think that the beauty of coming to work for the DeYoung Group, and when I took over this company, was that we do what it takes to get the job done and done right. And if it demands going to a smaller group because they do a dinner on a something night, then we go to that group to make sure we can get their engagement. If we can't go, we prepare the district to go to that group because maybe it's more trusted that the district walk into that group instead of a consultant they've never met walking into that group. So I guess my answer isn't very clear as to the best way, because the best way is how your community reacts to that and how we're going to do that. I think, once again, I'll always defer to that plan for planning, because as we look at your board members and as representatives from the board, we're going to ask those specific questions. Where is it going to be difficult to get people, and what are our good strategies to get there? Where are we going to demand a couple of more meetings because of large turnouts? And so we'll blend it. And again, this is your plan. It's not the consultant's process to bring you in. And so we'll make those adjustments as needed for your communities.
Couple more questions.
Yes.
So in your experience, when you've done this type of work, so if we approve the plan, does the length of time or the work, does it ever go beyond our cost? So is this a set cost, or are you saying we go longer than a year and a half because your community wants to talk a lot, which I'd rather hear more than less? With this, I don't want to be sitting at the table going, okay, now we got another 50,000 because we got to do another 3 meetings. So
Sure. Look, I think that there are, I'd like to say that we've never really done a change order because that's not the business we do. I mean, we are a professional service. We're not architects or engineers. I think that there's a reasonable expectation on both ends about what would demand more services. And I think that if you get to know me, you're going to know that I'm a communicator. I'm sometimes brutally honest, as I expect people to be with me. This is a work area that you have to be. And so if I think there's a concern, or if the district thinks there's a concern about that, we talk about it then. Typically, it's not a concern. I can think of very few instances, but I think that this board, this city school district, is a very mindful district and respectful district of the services that are provided to you. And so I trust that that communication is going to be there when necessary.
Thank you. So you also mentioned in your presentation that it's not only a facilities type of review, but you're looking at grade structure, building capacity. So, and some of us have been here for a lot of that, for changing the grade structure, changing a feeder pattern, unfortunately closing a school. Are those things that you're going to come back with and discuss in those community forums?
Yes, ma'am. If that is part of what the district wants to explore and where we see in that first community meeting, we're going to ask the questions about those things. I think those are all important discussions. I think, again, one of the benefits to our firm is that we don't come in with a predisposed idea of what's right. I'm going to tell you that every grade configuration you do will work. It's based on your community. Every school size will work based on how you operate the school. I don't have the luxury of telling you that there is one best way without meeting your community first. And so we have to address those things. I think when we get to the options, this is one of the more difficult parts of the process. And the only thing I can say is stay the course, because we will talk about boundary changes. We'll talk about consolidation of schools. Maybe it's we build one school for two, or maybe we won't. But we'll talk about things that are very difficult to talk about, emotional, certainly, and I hope it's emotional. I care about my schools, and so I expect that will happen. But I think that we have to stay the course. Regardless of how hard the conversation is, we can't kick the can. We've got to have the discussion regarding any of those topic areas you've talked about. So I hope your expectation of me is that I do bring those to you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And then one more. And then there's always talk about the win-win districts and the win-win situations that we have here in our district. Are those conversations or those demographic numbers and influences going to be considered? I don't know if it's your question or as Alex is over there smiling, it might be Alex's question.
Sure, no, I'll attempt to jump in on that one. So good timing. So we've had some very recent discussion about some major announcements in the news just in the past week about big developments that are planned for those kind of outer belt win-win locations. And so we're looking both at a lot of the infill that's happening in the core inner city, as well as those win-win areas where the future will tell, both in terms of how quickly those areas are developed and then whether those are going to be developed to attract households with no children, or whether they're going to be looking at starter homes potentially out in those win-win areas, so that we can do our best to make sure that we're trying to match our future capacity to what we expect to see. And so I just started having those conversations literally today with Tracy Healy, our partner who's working on the enrollment projection side, to make sure that we're looking at all those factors.
Because who wouldn't want to come to our district with our best teachers?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Oh,
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Trevino or Mr. Richter? Yes, Ms. Hudson.
Thank you very much. I guess I'm just still getting my arms around everything, and Alex has briefed us previously on, kind of issues up to this point. how much will this plan address, I've seen issues through our finance committee. We have a significant deficit on deferred maintenance on existing facilities. So tell me a little bit about how that will factor into this plan. I guess that's a starting point question.
Sure, absolutely. So I don't think you can look at either one in isolation. So clearly, as we work towards developing this facility master plan that'll have a sequence and a schedule, we'll have a good idea, pending funding, of course, that we'll have an idea of which buildings would come online sooner, and then we'll be looking to dovetail in that deferred maintenance list. And again, prioritizing kind of in reverse order. And I also think that'll in large part come into how we prioritize the buildings for the facility master plan. So we're looking hand in hand in a very similar way to how we rolled out our warm, safe, and dry program previously, to be able to make sure that we can keep roofs on buildings, we can maintain the envelopes and making sure that they're watertight, keeping up our HVAC systems. I think we'd even need to look at issues like parking lots, conditions of pavements, making sure that those buildings are accessible, they're educationally adequate, and can serve their function until we're able to get them replaced in this facility master plan.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. So as the plan develops and as the deliverable with the plan, is the plan really specifically about population movements and facility needs? Does it cost, how much does it cost out, what it would take to achieve those, the goals of meeting those new facilities, for example, or the facility needs?
You're asking
Will
me-
this plan cost out those efforts, or will that be a phase after this plan is completed?
That would be our goal, to bring those two together. And you're referring to the capital cost for those
Yes,
improvements,
yes.
correct? So yeah, so absolutely, we've been working internally. We have a team that's been working on assessing all of our existing fleet of buildings, the legacy buildings, our administrative and operations sites, and making sure that we have a good understanding of the cost of what we need to invest back into those facilities to make sure we can keep them operational and, again, adequate until we're able to get them replaced or renovated. So absolutely. Did I answer the question?
You did just one piece to that. Since this is the first time I've had to deal with this, where does the School Facilities Commission fit in with this process?
So they absolutely do. We've been in pretty constant communication. It is a little different in that when the original facility master plan was authored, it was largely done with OSFC taking the lead kind of with all the big urbans in authoring these facility master plans. So in this case, where we are kind of running lead, I think you'll see a slightly different, I shouldn't say focus. I mean, the focus is going to be on our educational facilities, but we'll also be looking at our administrative sites and our operations sites, where we really didn't put much focus into those before. So again, looking at all the opportunities that we have in facilities that the state doesn't necessarily co-fund. So think of our high school auditoriums, our athletic sites, and all the parts and pieces that the state doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of interest in.
Oh, and just one final thing, and to that point, it made me think, will that also look at existing facilities, both used and vacant, in terms of, are this school use versus possibly, selling that for, for other development and moving our operation someplace else?
Yeah, I would say all of the above. So I think we'll be looking at both our facility master plan projects that are complete, making sure we understand how well they're being utilized. We'll be looking at our legacy buildings and understanding what we need to provide in terms of new capacity in the facility master plan, and looking at our real estate holdings. To date, we've been able to hold on to some real estate. Some of that is vacant land. Some of it is actual operating buildings that are leased to third parties. I think as we look at some of the development you see across the city, it would serve us well to hold on to some of those sites where we think that there's the potential for future development that might give us enough critical mass to warrant future schools. I think it's pretty obvious that it would be very difficult in the future to acquire, a 7 to 9 plus acre site to be able to build a school into the future. And so to be able to have a strategic plan on how we hold real estate in areas that we think we might see future growth, and potentially work on partnerships with Rex and Park with the city to either, if we have vacant land that we don't have need for today, perhaps we enter into a midterm lease to be able to offer that to the community as green space, or continue leasing those properties to third parties where we can generate some rental income to offset our costs and still be able to protect that real estate for future needs.
Any other questions from board members for Mr. Trevino or Mr. Richter? Thank you very much for your presentation. We look forward to working with you. Thank you. Deputy Superintendent, have you anything else to add?
Mr. Board President, members of the board, that concludes the report for this evening. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Treasurer, have you anything brief you'd like to add to the meeting this evening?
Yes, Mr. President, can't guarantee it will be brief, but I do have a monthly financial report for you.
Carry on.
I will do my best. This evening, I'm here to report to you on the November financial report. I will mention to you that due to a rescheduling of our Finance and Appropriations Committee, the committee has not yet reviewed the report. They will do that this Thursday at 3:30 in our normal meeting location here in the Assembly Room. So you're seeing it first, and then the Finance Committee will see it later this week. Year to date, through November, the district has received about $352 million in revenue and about $330 million in expenditures. We were running about $3.5 million or $3.6 million under plan, about 1% under plan on revenues. Last month, we were at about $4.2 million under, so we're moving back towards the plan. Expenditures at this point are running about $12.3 million under plan, a little bit further under plan. Last month, we were at around 11.8 under plan. Just a graphical representation of this variance in total so that we can keep track of it. Due to rounding, you'll see that I just list millions of dollars. So we were about $4 million under last year in total, or last month in total, and $4 million again this month. Breaking that down by three major components, local, state, and non-operating revenues, you'll see that the only shift that has slightly occurred there was in local, coming in a bit closer to plan year to date than the previous month. Again, graphically tracking where we are on year-to-date revenues by these three categories, you can pretty much see here that we are, although under plan, we are tracking very, very close to plan, and there have not been any major anomalies yet so far. Breaking this down line item by line item, as listed in the 5-year forecast, these are the total revenues, the $352 million broken down. The variance in each of these categories on property tax, there has been no change from last month because we're in a very quiet period relative to property taxes. We'll see revenue begin to flow after bills go out in December, and we can begin to receive advances sometime in the month of January. State aid is running about $3.3 million ahead of plan. Looking at the numbers we're receiving from the state, and again, where we are right now, we believe that this positive variance will continue through the end of the year and could grow to approaching $4 to $5 million by the end of the fiscal year. At that point, it'd be about a 1.7 variance at the end of the year. So we that's if we're going to be off on revenue, it's good to be above here. So that's a small variance, but at least in the right direction. All the other line items, there's been no significant change in the variances for the other revenues. No change in other financing sources. There was nothing in that area going on in the month of November. Just giving you an updated picture on the property tax, nothing new there. That's month to month. On a year-to-date basis, you can see there that about $4 million difference on general property tax year-to-date. Again, no changes from the previous month. State revenues, as I explained last month, we had a little bump in October to catch us up when some new numbers and the budget numbers the state budget numbers were inputted into the formula. And again, as I said, we should see this positive variance most of the months carry forward. One of the rounding issues, it may appear here when I say $24 million in the plan and $25 million in actual. The real underlying numbers there are $24.8 million in actual month to month and $24.4 million in plan month to month. So that difference is only $300,000 to $400,000. So that is factored out, which will cause that to grow from the 3.3 to between 4 and 5, assuming this pattern continues. So you can't take that $1 million difference. I did it in my head myself and went, well, wait a minute, that should be about $7 million more. Well, That's not the real difference. We're only looking at about 300,000 difference in that rounding. So I probably should change my scale in the graph so it's not misleading to you. Again, year to date, just a graphical representation of where we are. We expect the trend to continue, and that actual line should follow right up the plan fairly close. Moving on to expenditures, $12.2 million or almost $12.3 million under plan so far. Graphically tracking that, a slight difference from last month, $12.2 million this month and $11.4 last month. If I break that down into categories in personnel, non-personnel, and other financing uses, you can see that there's a little bit of shift in personnel going from about $1 million to about $3 million under plan, and non-personnel from $4 million under plan to coming closer to plan year to date at $2 million under plan. No real change in the other financing sources on a variance basis, as I mentioned. Tracking the monthly expenditure flow, you'll see that although we had that one bump in October that I explained previously, we're back on track for this year's expenditure flow mirroring last year's fairly closely. I will mention one thing to you that you'll see in the month of December that I just picked up on it, and payroll is 26 pays per year, so we're going to have a 3-pay month every now and then. Well, when we looked at it, we had January as a 3-pay, but one of those pays is January 1st. Quite frankly, I missed it, so that's going to become December 31st. So the 3-pay month is actually going to be December by 1 day rather than January. So you're going to see a bump in the personnel expenditures in December, but that'll rectify itself in January. We were counting paydays, and I went 1, 2, 3 in January. That's the 3-pay month, and forgot it was going to move. So that's on me. On a year-to-date basis, the expenditures, again, tracking on plan, personnel about $3 million under, all the non-personnel about $9 million under plan. And so I consider this very much on pace. Breaking this down in the expenditure area line by line for the 5-year forecast, you'll see that of the $330 million that we spent year-to-date, about $67 million of that is in the charter school STEM and scholarship line item. Again, we've broken that out to highlight that month to month. I'll get to more of that later. On a variance basis, all the line items again this month, except for the charter schools line, are running under plan. I will delve further into charter schools here in a moment, but breaking this out, non-personnel operating expenses, excluding school choice, about $10 million under plan. School choice, as I said, is running about $8 million over. We were in the $6 million, $7 million over plan last month. And then the non-operating, non-personnel expenditures about $7 million under plan. So Scott, the budget director, and I, Mr. Gooding, and I looked at the non-personnel lines. We don't see anything that alarms us at that point. We anticipate that we should move in all the other areas, the non-personnel operating line items, towards plan as the year progresses. But again, keep in mind that that's all limited by appropriations, and we don't see anything that will cause us to adjust our plan at this point. We always like to look closer at school choice, updating the graph on where we are on the variance and what the plan calls for. As you recall, the plan was based upon last year's experience, and that had an anomaly in it for the month of April. Then putting together a revised plan of just equal payments each year or each month and making that comparison, you'll see that while we are 8.2 over plan against the original plan, the revised plan of equal deductions every month, we're about 1.3 under plan, which appears to be, obviously, given what actual deductions are occurring, a more realistic plan for representing what we can expect to have happen. I will tell you that we were told that the charter school enrollments, the school choice enrollments would be into the foundation deduction sometime in November or December. Well, we're through November and they weren't there, so we're expecting that to happen in December. We'll have a better picture when it gets to January. We also take a look at annualizing school choice to make sure that we have an appropriate amount in the plan and appropriated. As it stands now, we're still confident, given the data that we're seeing, that at $163 million on an annual basis in the plan, it appears that the month-to-month numbers and the state numbers are telling us that we should be around $159 million, and that means we've got some room there for variance if it should occur. Again, we should know better once those enrollment numbers come in the month of December, and we can report that to the board in January. Mr. President, that concludes my report on the November financial report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Treasurer. Are there questions from board members on the treasurer's report? All right. Board Member Hudson, anything you'd like to add as Chair of Finance and
Thank you,
Appropriations?
President Baker. Nothing to add. We will have Finance and Appropriations this Thursday at 3:30. It'll be here in this room, and so we'll delve into the detail of these financials, and we'll also have hear about some. Well, we'll have a deep dive on transportation expenses at this meeting, and then a couple other updates from the treasurer as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hudson. And I do believe that Mr. Cole had a question.
Not a question, just a quick statement. As we close out the year, I just want to say thank you to Treasurer Bohoric as well as Mr. Gooding for keeping us so well under expenses throughout this year. I just think it's an incredible testament to what great use and what great things we've been able to do with the few resources that we have to bear. So thank you for just giving us a report that despite that overage with the charter school piece, I think that's just kind of out of our control to an extent, that we got a clean financial bill of health.
Thank you. Good point. Any other questions or comments from board members for the treasurer? Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Have you anything else to report this evening?
I have nothing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.